As well as being able to connect to, for example, SQL Azure through the Power BI services we've seen, you can also connect directly to databases from within the Power BI desktop. So you start in the same way as importing data by going to the Get Data dialog. And then you can choose where you want to pick up your data from. And we actually support this against a few different data sources. So currently SQL Server, Oracle, Teradata, and Azure SQL database as well. I'm going to use the Azure one as an example here. And at this point, put in the server name and the database as you would do if you were importing data. But you can choose this direct query option. So the difference here is that if you're importing the data, you're taking a copy of the data out of that database and you're caching it within Power BI Desktop. For direct query mode, you're just saying, leave the data in that database and instead fire queries over to that database whenever I start building visuals. And your trade-off here is you're either moving the data from that database, right? So you're importing it, taking a snapshot into Power BI Desktop. Or in the direct query mode, you might take a performance hit because you're sending that query back over to the database and it's got to be calculated there. So there's obviously then some network traffic going on as well. It does require you to be connected to that database. So once you've chosen direct query, hit OK, and you'll be presented with the navigator options just as you would do if you were importing it. So here you can choose which tables you want to expose through Power BI Desktop. You'd also be prompted for your credentials if you hadn't already entered those. I've already looked at this database before, so it's going to just send me straight through. So I can choose the tables I'm interested in. So let's take our fact table, gender and date, a few other ones. And I can click load to finish that. Now, I'm not actually loading that data. You'll see here it says creating live connections. And all we're doing is just creating a connection back up to that server. And I can browse these tables just as I can do as if I had was working with the data locally. And let's do something like take our employee ID and just do a count of that employee ID into a card. Now, this will take a few seconds because I'm sending the query over to that database. And it's running in SQL Azure, but there's a fairly big table in here. So it's just doing a distinct count of all of those IDs. And it will give us the result back. We've got about 1 million employees in there. But the great thing about this direct query mode is that I can actually carry on working with it almost as if I was just working with the data locally. So I can do things like creating calculations, new columns or new measures on top of this as well. So I've got a measure that I had already created, save me retyping, that just goes and looks for employees who have been around for a little while. So we're just looking for people who have had a tenure of over 12 months. We're just counting the number of rows in our employee table that do that. Now again, this measure is going to be calculated on the fly whenever I start using it in a visual. So again, let's drop a card on there, and it's sending that same calculation back over to the SQL database. It's translating it into a query that database can understand, and it's going to give us the result back. So pretty quick way to just start exploring that data live. I don't need to go and import the data into Power BI Desktop. I can leave it where it is in that database, but I can carry on building calculations and measures on top of the data and building visuals just as if I was working with it all locally. I can even go and build or can even view the relationships that have come down from that database too and edit these if I need to. So you can see I've got that relationship here between our employees and our gender table. So I could, if I wanted to, say, well, let's take our gender from that gender table. And now let's look at our tenured employees by gender. So again, it's going to translate that into a SQL statement that database can run, send it over to that SQL Azure database and retrieve the result. And there we go. We can see our tenure is slightly longer for male employees, or we've got slightly more male employees with a tenure over a year. So I can work with all of that data just as if it was working locally, very, very simply, but using that direct query mode.